Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and what we're going to do is take a look at 3 other ways of actually color grading our images in Photoshop. A few weeks ago I did one method that was real popular, and we're going to take a look at 3 other ones. Also, I'm going to introduce to you an old riddle that's been around for many years, and it goes something like this. How many Photoshop people does it take to change a light bulb? The answer to the riddle coming up next. Are you ready for this? Let's do it! Okay, everybody, welcome back to my channel. Again, this channel is dedicated to increasing your imagination, creativity toward photography and as a photo artist. Now, before we take a look at 3 other ways that we can actually color grade, which are real popular techniques, let's cover that riddle I talked about, and that is, how many Photoshop people does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer typically is 4. 1 to actually change the light bulb, and the other 3 to stand around and give 3 other ways of doing exactly the same thing. That's a big joke. And that's the thing about Photoshop, is there isn't just one way of doing things. There's a lot of different ways that we can get the same result. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to do something very elementary, and I'm going to open up an image. And one of the ways that we can open up an image, so this would be the first way, is if I navigate my operating system right here. So let me minimize this so we don't need to see me anymore. And if I just right mouse click on an image that I want to open up, and we'll just choose open with Photoshop, and Photoshop will open up, and that's a way of actually opening up that image. This image I'll be using for this project because I used it last time for color correcting. And so I'm going to close out of that. So that's one method of opening up an image. The other method is the old-fashioned way, and that is actually to go to the File drop-down menu and choose the Open dialog box, and then navigate, go find the image, select it, and click on Open over here, and then that's the second way of actually opening up an image. The third way is just to use a shortcut keystroke, and that would be Control-O or Command-O on a Mac, and it would open up the Open dialog box, and just navigate, go find your image, point to it, and then click on Open, and that's the third way of opening up an image. The fourth way is the typical way that I always use, and I find that most people didn't know this technique. When I used to be on the road doing Photoshop seminars for about 20 years, by the way, I would be in front of groups as small as, in small towns, like 25 people, to as high as 300 people. And it always amazed me when I had large groups of, let's say, 100 to 200 people. When I showed this method, and I asked, how many people know this technique? I would barely get 4 or 5 hands that would go up. And this has been around for about 20 years. And here's the technique. My hand is usually on the mouse that I'm working on in Photoshop. If I just double click anywhere on the workspace right here, so I'm going to double click, it automatically just opens up the Open dialog box. Saves me a lot of time. I don't have to let go and do a shortcut keystroke or go to a drop-down menu, and just navigate, go find my image, and click on Open. So hopefully, you saw that there's 4 different ways of opening up an image. The last one, I'm sure a lot of you didn't know that you can actually do that technique. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at 3 common other techniques of color grading. I did one a few weeks ago. If you missed that video, I'll put a link in the show notes so you can actually go to that. I actually added painting with light with that technique. You could add the same technique for adding painting with light with these 3 other techniques I'm going to share with you, but I'm just going to focus on the color grading of an image. So these are non-destructive methods. So one of the methods that we can actually use, I'm going to come down here to the Oreo cookie dipped in milk. And the very first one I'm going to choose is something called Color Balance. Now when I choose that, it puts a adjustment layer here, very top of my layers. And you'll see over here in the Properties panel, I can go to the drop-down menu and say, I would like to affect my highlights only. And what I'd like to do, now the colors that you choose is strictly up to you. I'm just going to use a popular technique or color grading that I like to use in a lot of my images. So I'm going to push the slider over here to the right to add some red, and I'm going to push it hard because sometimes it's hard to see this on a video. So normally I wouldn't go that far, but again, it's adding that to the highlights it sees in the image. And then I'll go to the drop-down menu and choose shadows. In the shadows, I'm going to add some blue. So again, I'm going to over-exaggerate that a bit so we can see the before and after. Now that's pretty intense. So what I might do is pull my opacity down here in layers and just maybe, I don't know, 50%, or we'll go down to maybe 30% here. And there's a before, and after on color grading that. Maybe even a little bit less. So we'll drop it down to about, say, 20%. So before, after. And if you don't like maybe what's happening in certain areas of the image, or maybe I'm just going to pretend, oh, I don't like what's happening to her skin. Because this is a mask, and sort of assuming everybody knows what a mask is, maybe I should be doing a session on that. But basically, a mask just means whatever's white is revealing the adjustment on the layer. If I grab my paintbrush, so B for brush, to grab my paintbrush, and I paint in black, so my chip color here is black. If I paint over her face as an example, you can see over here, whatever is painted black is concealing that change of that adjustment layer. So now if I turn this on and off, that very top layer, it's affecting everything except her face. So it does give you some control if you like to use that technique with these adjustments. I'm going to delete that. And so that was one popular way that we can actually color grade. The other method, I'm going to go back to the Oreo cookie, again, dipped in milk, and I'm going to choose the very bottom feature called Selective Color. And this property panel is a little bit different with the sliders here, but you can go to the drop-down menu over here. Oops, choose the wrong one, where it says red. I'm going to choose whites, and whites is equivalent to like our highlights. And again, I might come up over here and say, you know what I want to do is I'm going to add some, let's say some yellow, and I'm going to push the yellows far to the right. Because again, I want to over-exaggerate this so you can see very subtle change by adding the yellows with color grading. And then I'm going to go to my blacks over here, and I'm going to add some cyan to that. So I'm going to push that hard to the right. So we see how that looks before, and after. And again, we could do things like pull the opacity down here in our layers so it's a little bit less. So there's a before and after. Again, I could grab my paintbrush and paint on the mask black to maybe take it off her skin if that's what I want to do. Probably I wouldn't want to do it on this one, but again, this is all personal preference. So there's before and after, so it's affecting everything else except their skin. So that's a second technique or way of actually color grading an image in Photoshop. And again, not limited to these 4 that I'm sharing with you. I'm sharing 3 today. I shared one a few weeks ago, a different technique. So let's take the third one right now, and that is a little pop-up menu, and this is called Color Lookup. Now, we never had Color Lookup years ago. I forgot what version of Photoshop this was introduced, but it's been around for quite a while. And when I click on this, I'm going to share a little suggestion for you. And that is when you take a look at over here in the Properties panel, there's a drop-down menu, and we can scan through different settings, and some are a little bit more intense, as you can see. And so I'm going to make a recommendation, and that is pull the opacity in your layers down to 50%, because sometimes something that doesn't look really well, had you pull the opacity down, it looks really cool. So I usually put mine close to 50%. And just a little tip, and I apologize for the Mac users, if I choose like the very start item in the drop-down menu, if I just tap on my down arrow key, I can scroll through these different color grading techniques called LUTs real fast, or my up arrow key to scroll through these really quick. That typically does not work on a Mac computer. I'm sure there is a shortcut keystroke, but again, I apologize because I'm not using a Mac. If somebody does know a technique, or even if there is one to scroll up and down like that real fast, if you can share that with us, that'd be great. But let me just share a little gotcha with this. If I choose something like, well, let's go to the drop-down menu. Let's say I like something like that. And I decide, you know what, I'm going to pull the opacity up a little bit on that. And then I want to continue scrolling through the different LUTs, and I hit my down arrow key. It doesn't work because I went to the adjustment layer and I made a little change. So what I have to do is go back here to the drop-down menu, recheck that, and now I should be able to hit my down arrow keys and again scroll through all the different LUTs. Now, one of my favorite ones is at the second to last, and that's teal orange. And again, I might pull that down a little bit. And again, there's my before, and after. And again, this is all personal preference. In fact, I'll share with you in a few minutes which is the best technique for color grading. But again, I can grab my paintbrush and say paint on her face on the mask over here again, that you can see. So it's blocking that change, and only the area in white will reveal my color toning in that image, and whatever's black is hiding that change. So again, this is a before, after, before, after. So let's talk about, I just introduced 3. I introduced another one to you. So there's actually 4 popular techniques for actually color grading an image in Photoshop. The best technique, ready for this, is your technique, whichever method you enjoy the best. Okay, I'm not going to dictate, oh, this is the way you should do it. It's all personal preference on this. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's, if we can get me back in here, if you can do me a favor, if you like this, if you learned something today, please hit the like button. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed at all, and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload an image. And let's please remember that get that camera out, start practicing shooting, and get creative. And I will see you in the next video. See ya!